Good old progress. So it's 5 years since we last had a garden mosqueing conference. I don't know how many of you actually came to it. It was an in-person one. But that was the day that I was hopping up and down because I was waiting for a hernia operation. And I was in great pain, standing up for about 3 or 4 minutes and then starting to sit down again. So I remember that very well. But that was 5 years ago. We organised one in March 2020. And of course, just managed to miss the deadline for the lockdown. So we didn't have that one. And we haven't had another one since. So 5 years since we had a conference. This time we're on Zoom, partly because it's so difficult to organise an in-person conference. But maybe we'll think about one for next year. So perhaps people could bear that in mind as we go through the day. Right. As I said a little bit earlier on to those of you who are here, I would like, if we can, to find time for a comfort break somewhere halfway between in the middle of the morning. So we'll try and arrange that. Are you ready, Evan?
Yeah. All raring to go.
Well, it's now 10:03, so I think we're allowed to start. How many are we up to now? We're up to 54. But let's make a start then, shall we?
Okay, I'll go and find out how to do it.
Thank you. Evan, by the way, writes the quarterly analysis of results for the newsletter. So he sees all of the results coming in. So he knows a lot about the moths we see. Evan, over to you.
Right. Is it on the screen there?
Yes.
Where?
It's on mine anyway.
It's on mine too.
Okay. Where's
You want to get it to?
I want to get it to the big one.
Just
Can you see it, Evan?
yeah, we just want to get it on the big side.
Just trying to get it bigger. There we are. I think. Is that it? Yeah. Okay, then, as Norman said, I'm meant to talk about the last year, 2023, and its relationship to previous years. Right, this is my depiction of the GMS Vice County sites throughout the region, including Ireland and the Channel Islands. The number and distribution of recorders have varied in numbers and geographical distribution over the years. At present, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland are poorly represented geographically. Although Wales has many recorders, they are mostly in the south. Vice counties in Mid and North Wales are either not represented or only have one recorder. For example, our house in Mid Wales near Aberystwyth is the only representative for VC 46. The same story applies to both Scotland and Ireland. With global warming becoming more of an issue, coverage of these areas will be vital for the future. Some of the vice counties are coloured but do not have a recorder shown. This is usually because of a lack of large gaps in their recording history. I included the recorders who had sent in their quarterly four forms that showed a good track record for the previous 36 weeks. In some cases, I had the assistance of their regional coordinator who was able to explain any problems. The reason for some of the missing recorders included health or family problems coupled with their work commitments that intruded into their mothing schedules. Just because they are not shown does not mean that their efforts are wasted, as their information is kept on file for historical purposes. The number of gardens does not always agree with the number of actual recorders, as a few dedicated people have more than one trap. Please tell me if I have accidentally left you out of the picture. Following on from this map, this pie chart shows the number of gardens per region. Like other regions, the Channel Islands are poorly represented with only one recorder on the island of Jersey. As you can see from both the pie chart and the table, the East Midlands have the largest number, followed by the Northwest and the Southeast. I'll give you a few minutes to locate your region. Okay. This next pie chart is similar to the one shown previously, but this time it describes the regions in terms of their percentage catch. As one would surmise, the regions with the greatest number of recorders will provide the highest percentage total. The table on the right shows the regions and catches with the East Midlands with the most, followed by the East of England and the Northwest, with the Channel Islands, not surprisingly, with the least. Just because a region has a lot of recorders, it does not always follow that they have the most moths, as both the locality and the type of trap are important factors. This next slide shows two of the most successful regions, namely the East of England and the Northwest, with the recorders and the wattage power of their traps. The two charts depict the number of moths they caught, together with the light power of the trap shown by the color code on the right. The recorders are sorted using their total catch on the left side of the chart, while their wattage is shown on the right side. Each recorder bar is colored according to its wattage. In both regions, the 125 MVs had the biggest catches, while with a few exceptions. But in the East of England, the second highest catch was made with a 60-watt actinic. This is a point that's been made by Norman several times in the past. However, many recorders have pointed out that each light or frequency attracts different species. None are perfect, so we must live with the laws made to protect the environment. This chart shows a number of sites or gardens sampled per year from 2010. As mentioned previously, some recorders in 2023 are not represented here. In some ways, the quarterly snapshots with these missing recorders present are closer to real life than the statistically approved ones. But unfortunately, a line has to be drawn somewhere to be able to compare with previous years. You need a level playing field. The number of 2023 recorders was down on the previous year, 2022. Tragically, there have been a few deaths during the year, and a few recorders who had multiple traps have reduced their trapping effort after being depressed about the lack of moths. It must be said here that the region recorders have made valiant efforts to try and recruit more people for the citizen science project. There was also a slight rise in the number of recorders in the COVID lockdown, with people turning to moth trapping to keep themselves sane. This slide shows the mean number of moths caught weekly for 2022 and 2023. The results must be averaged due to the different number of gardens, with 330 in 2022 and 295 in 2023. It shows the classic sine curve for both years, with the highest number of moths caught in the third quarter. You may notice that I've used the terms mean and average in the same chart. This may upset some of you the statisticians. However, I thought that mean moths may not be good publicity for the moths, especially when many people think that all moths eat their clothes. In this chart, the top 20 species of the year were taken, and their percentage change and positions in the overall population were compared in these 2 years. There were some big changes with major gains to the large yellow underwing and the garden grass veneer, and some losses, including the square spot rustic and the Hebrew character, which went down slightly. This latter one interested me because I also thought they were less frequent. I then looked up our records and found in 2023 we caught 18, as opposed to 17 in 2022. This slide shows how 2023 has compared with previous years. 2012 was the worst, with a cold and wet extended spring, and 2019 was a truly bumpy year. Looking at this chart, one would wonder why people are concerned about the decreasing number of moths. One drawback of this chart is it is very general, with the more successful moths hiding the problems. The last quarter was an example where the figures look good, but it was only because of a large influx of large yellow underwings in week 28 that distorted the picture. I'm aware there are several reasons for the gradual decline in the number of some of the moths, but one of the big bugbears for many recorders is street lighting. Perhaps this may change, as I read that Colwyn Bay is planning to change the color or wavelengths of the LEDs to help their nocturnal species, including bats and moths. Also, some of the lights in America are turning purple due to a breakdown in the phosphor coating. Right. This slide continues with the distribution of the large yellow windowing according to regions. As you can see, the highest catches were in the Northwest and the East Midlands. Perhaps this is caused by the occasional migration from the continent. This somewhat daunting chart shows a mean regional distribution of moths since 2011. The Channel Islands has a gap of 2 years, and this is due to a delay in changing recorders. I hope it is pointing in the right direction, as in the past I have been accused of exaggerating continental drift. In conclusion, 2023 has been a good year for moths, with numbers higher than the previous 3 years. Many moths have shown small increases, but the big three have swamped the overall pattern. The spring weather was comparable to 2012, but improved later, so catches caught up. And for my benefit, for future reports, for those who haven't submitted their records, please send them in. Audrey is desperate for them. Do you have a favorite moth you want me to highlight in the future? Because we are running out of ideas. Any comments about the weather in your area would be helpful, as it's always boring just to hear about mine. And do you also have a weather station which we could add? Right. I hope this has been okay for you, Norman.
Right. Yes, that's very good, Evan. And also, you've, as you said, you kept the time as you said you would. So we've got a little bit of time for questions and comments and discussion.
Right.
With 57 people round the table, the online table, this could be slightly difficult to handle. But would anybody like to ask Evan a question?
Yes, Bob here in Pembrokeshire, Evan. Slightly disappointed to see that there's only one, appears to be on your map, only one gardens moth scheme system in Pembrokeshire. I presume that's us, where I thought there were several running in the county with garden moth schemes. I hadn't realised there'd been such a reduction in numbers. Is that a fact?
I can check the figures, but I think, but according to what I found, that's all I found.
Gosh, well, I hope our records are included then, because I'm sure we're not. I didn't think we were alone, in the county.
I'm quite happy to be proved wrong.
Yeah.
Robin normally sends in records, doesn't he?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know whether he did it last year because he's given up on being the county recorder now, for various reasons. And obviously got a new county recorder now. But I thought, but yeah, Robin had been doing it, and I thought others had been too. But well, maybe we don't qualify. I don't know. Maybe we're the ones.
You do.
But the other thing is, with the weather stations, we use our local weather station for a lot of the information that helps us record the temperature and so on and so forth. But I've always felt over the years we put in the temperature, overnight temperature, which is useful. But I don't know whether we ever really record wind and rain effects, because we do know that these things do affect moth flight, but we don't record it. but we know what it is locally, but we don't record it in the system.
Yeah, you're quite right there. But it's very hard to generalize wind because there could be two gardens in the same region, and they've got totally different sort of aspect to the wind. Also, it's very hard to get data about wind because all the data I use comes from airports and other places that put them on the net, and they don't include wind.
Anybody else got any questions?
Well, I have a. Can anybody hear this?
Yes, John, we okay.
Yes. Okay. Good. I have a further comment about the weather situation. That really what you need is a local weather, obviously, that's relevant to your moth trap. So you would need the weather conditions within about 50 meters or something of the trap. So taking information from the local weather station may not be really what you need, but and of course the issue of the wind is an important point. There are sheltered conditions because of the position of your housing and so on, which could lead to much reduced wind locally. And all wind measurements are sort of made at an altitude of 10 meters, I think it is. So that obviously isn't relevant to a moth trap, which is at 1 meter. So there's a point about the local weather conditions, which is really going to make it a real challenge to make a note in any case in the GMS itself. But I mean, I have a further question actually on something completely different. And that was your original chart showing the distribution of observers around the country. There seemed to be a big white gap, which looked like Berkshire. I don't know. But, you know, from Berkshire, of course, here. Can you explain that white area?
Put the chart up.
On your original chart.
Chart.
It was about the first or second chart that you put in.
Oh, yeah, share screen.
You put the chart up.
Okay, let's see. Share. Is that it? No. Okay.
Well, you want the first one. You want
I think it might have been the one before that, actually. Oh, right.
that one,
This one?
isn't it?
That
Yeah.
that's the one. Yes.
Yeah.
What's happened there?
I'm not sure. Actually, the second one might be an error on my side. I know the one on the left. I
Oh,
couldn't.
yeah, that's not Berkshire.
No, which is Berkshire? The one on the left or the right?
I think it's the one on the right.
Yeah, that might be an error on my point, but
yeah.
North
Well, either way,
Hampshire,
there are two.
I hope you still exist.
Yeah. Well, exactly. But there are clearly two white areas there, which
Yeah.
Yeah.
raised. Well, I thought, well, that's a bit odd, but anyway, it's something to.
Well, I'm
to
sorry if
look
I've
into.
wiped you off the world.
Well, I'm pretty convinced there are probably an awful lot of people around here, actually. So you probably are getting a lot of GMS readings or GMS data from Berkshire. So I was rather curious to see absolutely.
Yeah.
And a further comment on that, Matt. I presume those dots are fairly just centralised on a particular region. They don't actually sit on the local garden itself, do they? Because if they do, then where that dot is in Pembrokeshire must be Robin Taylor or somebody to the north of us, and we're not on the map at all.
Well, I was discussing this map with our son, and he said, "Where are the dots?" He said, "Are they on a mountain? Are they in the garden?" And they're just in the region.
Right.
I just pushed them in the region.
Okay.
And also, I thought if I actually did find the person's garden, they might be rather worried that their position has been known to the world.
Yeah.
But there'll only be dots on that map if your results have been sent in to Evan. And it's possible that you've done the work, you've done the recording, but for whatever reason, the records haven't been sent to Evan. So maybe, Evan, if you can check with the relevant area coordinator, see if there's been an issue with not coming through.
Yeah. What I did for this map is I took the last quarter of the last year, and only use those people.
Yeah.
And if they'd done their 36 or approximately 36 weeks, I included them. There were some where big gaps were left, and so I had to leave them out.
I think there's also a potential here that not all regional coordinators are able to send all the results to Evan
Mm.
in the time they're required for the report, but they probably all go to Audrey anyway for input into the database.
Yeah. The thing is, each quarter is just a snapshot. They're just a snapshot in time, really.
Evan, if you redo the map, I'm quite happy for the red dot to be where I am, because it will give a much more accurate picture, because I'm actually right on the coast, and the red dot for Gwynedd isn't on the coast.
Okay, right. I'll try and remember that. So where
Can I
about
ask? Oh, sorry. Can I ask something?
The tip of Gwynedd,
right?
the right-hand tip of Gwynedd, not the left-hand tip. The left-hand tip is Bardsey, and I'm on the other tip.
Mm.
Oh, right.
Very nice.
Lonely.
Yes, we were in Bardsey last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, went for a trip to Bardsey.
Right, nice. Yeah, very nice.
The other thing to remember, I think, is that these are obviously vice counties as opposed to counties that we might recognise. So the two white ones there are, according to my list at least, South Wiltshire and North Hampshire. I think Berkshire is the one just above the white area.
That's right. Yeah, they are in vice counties.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that cleared things up anyway.
Stop sharing.
Any more questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No. I mean, there's an awful lot of information in the talk to digest, but is the sort of huge increase in the numbers of the grass veneer throughout the UK, and what were the reasons for the dramatic increase in numbers?
If only we knew.
I mean, I personally think we had probably our largest catch in Pembrokeshire, and I really think it was the warm June. We had an incredibly hot period of weather in the sort of it was a very dry spring and summer, to be honest. I mean, here anyway, and the weather conditions for micro moths I thought were quite good. And I kind of assume that it's to do with that warm spell of weather.
Well, I'm always very impressed when I go through the figures and try and find the maximum catch any person has caught, and I'm really impressed at the dedication that some people do when they calculate the moths, especially these tiny little grass veneers. I remember that there was I think he was a county recorder for Warwickshire years ago, and he moved to near Lampeter, and we were digitizing VC46 records, and I couldn't believe the number of large yellow underwings he had. He had hundreds each time.
He counted them all.
Yeah, and he counted them all. At least I assume he counted them all. And I just couldn't believe his dedication.
I thought we're supposed to count them, aren't we? I mean, that's the whole point.
Well, congratulations to these people.
But when you've got several hundred, it can be quite a challenge, particularly when some of them fly away. So counting isn't always necessarily all that. And I guess if you've got several hundred grass veneers in your trap, the mind boggles at how to get that accurately recorded and enumerated. What's your maximum? What's the highest number that anybody's?
Oh gosh,
Last year,
600, 800?
I can't remember that one.
You won't have it.
No, I don't have that figure right now.
I do remember that my predecessor, a county recorder in Breconshire, at one time had a trap full of chestnuts. And it was so full he couldn't lift the trap.
Well, send them my way then.
So are we saying then that when we are sending in these counts, we're putting in a kind of a minimum total? Because that doesn't get through. I mean, I put in what I record as a number, There's nowhere I can say, but 20 escaped or things like that. So, I mean, are we actually therefore under recording?
I think that's always going to be the case, Bob, because there'll be one or two that fly away before you even recognise what they were. One or two that are so worn you can't identify them, and there'll be one or two that you just miss because we're all human. So yes, I'm sure we do under record, but that under recording isn't doesn't cause bias. It's general across the whole scheme.
But
And
if
all
we
we
had
can
a
do
particular,
is record what we find.
yeah, but if we had a particular bumper number of things in certain regions, I guess, maybe due to the weather, maybe due to like the garden grass veneer, where we just simply couldn't cope with the number, we've got no real ability of saying, but this was actually a tiny proportion of what we really caught. So which might be useful in the analysis.
I don't know how to answer that. As county recorder, when I get county recorder records, then they can be put in the comments column. There were a lot more than 500, for example, you could say. But as a garden moth scheme record, you can't. But since the records go to the county recorder anyway, you can always make that comment if you wish, separately.
Yeah, well, that's certainly possible. But I'm just thinking with the GMS, where we're trying to analyze trends, we might be missing something that we can't add to because we think something's gone up or down. In actual fact, we haven't got a complete picture.
Yeah, there will be inaccuracies, certainly. I think that's life, frankly. Any more? How are we doing for time? We've still got a few minutes left, but
I've just got a question about the statement that you just made about the records going to the county recorder. Is that driven from the GMS recorders? You know, the local area recorders.
We ask our recorders, in fact, we ask all recorders to send their record individually to the county recorder. It's
Okay.
It's up to the recorder themselves to do that, but we do encourage it strongly.
Okay, that's what I assumed, because I think yeah. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm sure I saw on my next screen. Where's Roger? Where are you, Roger? I can't find you.
I'm here.
You are here. Good. I'm glad to hear you. I can't find you. Oh, there you are. Right. Are you ready to
Yeah, I'm ready. Yep.
stage, Roger? In that case, we'll move on to the GMS Recorder Database and Questionnaires by Roger Freestone, who maintains these resources. And as I've always thought, that is a non-trivial task, Roger.
Yeah, it definitely is. Hopefully I should be sharing my screen. Are we there?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So I've been involved in Garden Moth Scheme now, I think since about 2007, and I've been the East Midlands Regional Coordinator. Let me just get this into a proper format. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, I've been involved in. Everyone seen the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I've been involved since 2007, sort of started off as a recorder. I think Dave Grundy recruited me in the early days. And then I got involved in being a regional coordinator. And also as part of that, I sort of got involved with maintaining the master participants list, which is essentially the register of the individuals involved in GMS, and also with the garden questionnaires, which puts some habitat data against the records that everybody records weekly. So really what I want to talk about today really is the paperwork behind the GMS, and it's not truly paperwork in the sense it's in paper, but it's regarded as digital paperwork. So if we first of all just review about this, I think hopefully the purpose is to monitor our common garden moths, and we collect standardized quantitative data based on a core list of common garden moths, along with some local species additions and some qualitative data based on habitat data And this is to provide a long-term data set to help us identify potential issues relating to the garden moths that we record, their conservation. So it's essentially, it's a constant effort recording scheme. And obviously the longer we get people recording at the same site, possibly the more beneficial their data is. And if we look at the GMS data that anyone involved in GMS supplies, is we have the annual record sheets, which are in an Excel form. They then eventually end up into the MapMate database, which is where Audrey and Mike Cook get involved. And then this information is available for researchers to use on request. And to supplement that, we have garden questionnaires, which every recorder should fill in. And that's not always the case. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to have this discussion today, just to express the importance of these garden questionnaires, to make sure that the moth record data has some basis to it with regards to local habitats. So the garden questionnaires come in the Excel form, and then they all go into a GMS habitats database. And this is a relatively new one, which I'll talk about a bit later, that Mike Cook has helped us to develop, on being able to use a macro on the garden questionnaires to get this database. And I'll talk about this later. And then that information is available for researchers should they want it. So sort of looking at the data flow, we have the moth record forms that we should all be familiar with, at least those who do record at the moment for GMS. I think this is my 2023. And you can see there, I had 2 blanks last year, and I've just repeated that this year. So I've no moths for my summer scheme yet. And then the garden questionnaires. So moth record forms, eventually following various verification stages, end up in the GMS records database, which is the MapMate, which Audrey Turner manages at the moment. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the garden questionnaires go into the habitats database. Now, this information enables then researchers to do their bits and bobs and come up with their very clever statistical analyses. So we get some papers. I think this one that Adam Bates and John Sadler did, I think, was one of the first ones we did. There's another one that Adam Bates involved with, and then John Wilson did a couple. And so without this information, it's not possible that the researchers can do their work to really understand what's happening to our garden moths. Okay. So if we just talk a little bit now about a garden questionnaire. Now it's in an Excel, it's an MS Excel form, and it should be recorded by each GMS recorder in order to define the various data pertaining to the location of their recording site or sites, essentially their garden. And it's of this quite straightforward form, which is available from regional recorders and will be on the new GMS website, which is being developed at the moment. So if we now look a little bit more about what happens. So a garden questionnaire is sent to the appropriate regional coordinator for the initial check-in, and then sent forward to myself at the moment for inclusion in the master participants list. And then we can enter the details into the participants list. And essentially the garden questionnaire decides the size, location and habitat features of the recording sites, and is essentially split into 3 sections. So we've got the general site and recorder information. So this is very much what I see as the initial registration information to join GMS. Then it looks at the local area features, so the features around the gardens, and then the actual features within the garden. So if we look here, this really is quite straightforward. You know, we want a name and an address. The email again, I'll put if any, but I think generally we don't have any, well, certainly I don't have any paper records coming in. The grid reference, the vice county, and the trap wattage. So what this allows us to do is to then identify some key elements of the data flow, so we can record a unique site code. So that's my actual site code. That's the East Midlands 02. We can have a unique recorder's name. And those of you who have been with the scheme for some years will have noticed that this has changed, I think changed 2 years ago, where now we combine the site code with a recorder's name to get a unique recorder's name. And what previously happened, we would have a number of people with the same name, basically. And it became difficult to have a unique recorder's name when we got so many the potential of people with the same name. But this also enables us to link the site, the site code with the habitats database, which I'll come on to later. So we can also have a standardized address of the site. This is all for input into the MapMate database at the end of the day. So in this instance, my unique site is West Bridgeford, Fountains Close, which is in Nottingham. And we tend to have a 2-field site code, so typically the local area, and followed by probably the road, or in some instances we may have 3 if there's other people in the similar areas. We also standardize the trap type, so we have of the format Robinson trap 125 watt MV, or it could be a Heath trap 20 watt actinite, or a Heath trap 20 watt blacklight, or whatever. But again, trying to standardize the information that goes into the database in order then that we can ensure that when the information goes out for people to look at, it is in the most friendly format. So for instance, the information that I get off the GMS garden questionnaire, the first part goes into that data box on the top left-hand corner of the recording form. So you can see this is top of mine, which is, it's got my Vice County 56, the grid reference, my unique recorder's name, the address of the site, and the trap type. If we look then at the garden, the area features, that's quite straightforward, whether it's urban, suburban, rural, and there's some guidance on what we mean about that. What's the sort of soil type? What are the sort of local features is we talked about earlier, is the nearest street light, distance from the nearest green space, and these essentially select one of these to sort of identify the key features of the garden. And then the garden, so I've got that wrong, that's the area feature. So that's really what's going on around the garden, and then more into the specific garden features itself. Is it small, medium and large? What's the sort of size of lawn? Are there trees locally, oak trees? Now this questionnaire was set up, I think, at the beginning of the garden Moth scheme. I think when Dave Grundy set it up, and I think this was in conjunction with people like Adam Bates at Birmingham University at the time, in order to identify key features that should be available to look at when looking at the habitats associated with records from a specific site. So what we do now is we've just developed, and it's only this year that we've done this, is a habitats database. So the garden questionnaire information using a macro is linearized and added to the habitats database. And it's of this sort of format where we use the site code to link the habitat data to the database data via the recorder's name. Just to talk a little bit as I go along about data security. And we do have, because this contains personal information, we do have limited access to the habitats database, which is stored within a secure Dropbox. And prior to issue, it's anonymized to ensure there's no personal information in line with the data policy, which I'll talk about a bit later. So the format of the habitats database, and this is just showing what mine looks like, my garden looks like, is we look at the year it was updated, because it is important that we have updated garden questionnaires, the site code, the grid reference, the habitat type, the soil type, going all through the information that was on the garden questionnaire, and include a date when the questionnaire was updated, because over the years we've had a number of updates of questionnaires, and it's important that we record when they were updated, or as near excuse me, as we can to when they were updated. So to give an example here, it's only a small element, but sorry, that I had sort of wild ivy developed in my garden around to a significant level in 2015. And you can see now, following the 2015 update, I can demonstrate within my habitat there is wild ivy. There's obviously a number of people over the years are making their gardens more sort of moth nature friendly, and it would be good to have any updates that people have when they've done those updates, so we can have this in the habitats database. Excuse me. So this is an example. One of the first papers that was done was where environmental data from the garden questionnaires was used. So this was by Adam Bates and John Sadler. And here you can see how they were looking at the various habitat information that they would have got straight from the sort of basic garden questionnaires. Now with the habitats database that we've developed, this would be a lot easier for them to access along with the other moth records that they and are able to get. I think it's important to say that I know over the years, sometimes some garden records have not been able to be used by some researchers because we didn't have garden questionnaires on file. And I sort of regularly do go back to the regional coordinators and ask them to get garden questionnaires if they're missing. And unfortunately, with some garden records we have in the database, the people are no longer involved with GMS. And so some of that data is not as useful as it could be because we don't always have the garden questionnaire. So one of my messages today is to ensure that we have garden questionnaires on file. So then just looking at the data flow with regards to the record, which I think most people are aware of, the GMS record forms are checked by the regional coordinators. So they're the people who work locally with the local recorders, and then annually forwarded for final checking and entry into the GMS database, which Audrey manages and Mike Cook helps as well. This doesn't, within this record format, it doesn't mention the fact that, as Evan said, that quarterly he receives records for him to do intermediate analyses. I also do some intermediate analyses for the East Midlands region. So I think this is why there may be some discrepancies on Evan's map where recorders probably didn't get their records in time to send to Evan, whilst at the end of the year, following various cajoling from the excuse me, from the regional coordinators, a full set of records are then sent in for inclusion within the true GMS database. So from the GMS database, we anonymize records, and again, it's important to protect personal data. We send an anonymized, or anonymized data is available to send to researchers, and that would have the site code, the Moth information, the grid reference. Getting that down to a 6-figure, it's not so specific as opposed to people who use a lot larger figures, which really does actually show possibly, you know, the paving slab within the garden itself, the VC, the date, the quantity and method. And as I mentioned earlier, we can use this site code, my case EM02, that will link to the habitats database, which the researchers will have available for them to use if it's required within the research that they want to do. So then on to the master participants list, and this really collates all information relating to participants and site details. It's very much an administrative tool. I've sort of been responsible for this since Dave Grundy handed it to me in, I think, 2008. And it can be essentially is an administrative tool. So we've got details of the recorders. So should data go awry at a regional level, we have information on how we can contact the various recorders. And it's just ensuring we've got a register of who's involved or has been involved with GMS. So there is limited access to the master participants list. It is secured within a secure Dropbox and on secured PCs, and it is for internal use only. So it's not issued to third parties. It does have personal data on it, and that's why it's essentially is an internal register for GMS. So it actually looks something like this. So the fields are the site number, we record, well, we try and keep as updated as possible, whether there's an active participant. As you can see, this is my information. That's my name, my mapmate name, my mapmate site address, the email, the VC, the grid reference, the trap I use. Do I have a questionnaire on file? So again, the questionnaire, so the participants list enables us to keep on top of the people who've got questionnaires on file, and then more the personal details, in particular the full name of the recorder and the site address. So obviously we wouldn't want this information going off without some control, and that's why this is essentially is an internal register for GMS. So just finally coming on to general data protection regulations. So the statement I think that I took from what Mike Cook puts in the instructions. We take data security very seriously and will always comply with the GDPR and all subsequent legislation when dealing with personal data. There will be a full copy available on the new website of our data policy when it's up and running, or on request via regional coordinators. And by submitting information to GMS, recorders essentially agree to GMS using their records as described in the data policy. And there is a guidance document that's being drafted at the moment to ensure all of us within the regional coordination network are aware of the compliance issues associated with the data policy. As with any sort of personal records, with any GDPR regulations, any recorders can at any time request removal of their details and records by contacting their regional coordinator. And if the people are on any email circulation lists, again, they can be removed from that by contacting their regional coordinator. So we try and do things through regional coordinators who will then sort of communicate, in my instance, for the participants list and the habitats database, and it would then go to Audrey for removal from the main GMS database on the mapmate, should that be required by recorders. Okay, so I'm just coming now towards the end of my talk. So the sort of takeaway messages that I want people to be aware of is really we need up-to-date garden questionnaire for each recording site. And to ensure we do this, we should always ensure we have a completed questionnaire by new or relocated recorders prior commencing GMP recording. So in this way, we ensure that we've got the correct information for inclusion on the recording form and for eventual GMS database entry. A lot of work is carried out by Audrey and Mike and others in ensuring or getting the data into the mapmate, and it's made easier if we've got consistent data throughout from what's already in mapmate and also is on the recording forms, hence ensuring we always get an up-to-date recording, up-to-date garden questionnaire. And just a reminder, if people relocate to a new site or have a new site within their current site, so they, for instance, run a second trap, then we should have a new garden questionnaire, because that will end up with a new site reference number as well. So garden questionnaires should be updated if significant changes have occurred on or around the garden. For instance, Evan alluded to street light changes. It could be a garden pond, it could be a compost heap. But again, if we can get those updated, then that would be ensure that the data that goes out to researchers is traceable back to the sort of time that those changes were made, but also a good overview of what the habitats are associated with the sites. Previously, we did ask for a garden questionnaire to be updated when the trap and light was changed. This became too onerous. And as we have that information updated every year on the recording form, that's not necessary to update. And just to be aware and feel comfortable that, you know, we are doing everything to ensure your personal data is secure. Okay, so that's me done. Is there any questions?
Thanks, Roger. I think many people wouldn't be aware of how much work is going on in the background to ensure that data is kept secure and is useful. So I think that was very helpful. Thank you. Questions?
Yes, I have that. Very useful, very interesting. I mean, gosh, I filled my questionnaire in for our garden probably at the start of when I got involved in the scheme, and it must be, what, 15, 16 years ago. And I've been wondering ever since, you know, how is this updated? Because I've never, ever been asked to update it or even knew I could. So I've never seen that questionnaire form in that format, I don't think. I think it was a slightly different format, maybe. Maybe it wasn't, maybe just my memory's lapsed, but I would very much welcome, you know, updating the garden questionnaire. I think, and I kind of wonder whether we should be almost doing it on a, well, say a regular basis, you know, not every year maybe, but certainly perhaps every 5 years be asked to think about it. Because I think there'll be lots of changes going on in gardens, huge changes, I should think.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think the format, probably some of the wording on the garden questionnaire may have changed over the years, but the essential features are the same. So we've not changed any of the parameters. And again, I think the view is that, as this meeting is here today, is to keep people informed, you know, that garden questionnaires are important, and that we would welcome updates to ensure that the habitat information that we can issue associated with the Moth records are correct, or as correct as we can make them.
Okay, well, that's useful. I mean, I'd certainly welcome. I don't know whether I haven't seen a copy lately, so I don't know whether how accessible the form is. I guess, Norman, you send them out to us, do you, on occasions?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is that I think regional coordinators should have copies of them, but with the new website that's being developed at the moment, there will be garden questionnaires on there. I can't remember whether or not on the GMS Facebook pages. I don't know whether Mike Cook can comment on that, if the questionnaire is available there.
I'm just going to check and get back to you.
But whatever, they are available, you know, one way or the other. You know, through your regional coordinator, you should be able to get, well, you will be able to get the questionnaire to update.
As a regional coordinator, I recognise I'm probably not as proactive as I should be in informing my recorders of all of this. But it's useful to know the website will take a role in this, because I suspect that some of the questionnaires submitted from my recorders, Welsh recorders, are now out of date.
Yeah, I think that possibly is the case. I think that's a general thing. Even though I'm involved with the garden questionnaires or the management of them, I think I would say the same, that may be appropriate for East Midlands gardens as well, that they're not fully up to date. So this really is a bit of a call to action, that to remind people to get the garden questionnaires. And now that we have the linearized habitats database, that to say thanks so much to Mike Cook for sorting the macro out on that, it makes it a lot easier to manage the questionnaires when they come in, and it will make it a lot easier to issue that data to researchers when required.
The other thing, if I may ask, I guess you probably get this updated anyway via, in our case, Norman and in Wales. But when I would have filled in my original garden questionnaire, etc., it would have been for a different email address that I currently have. I presume the email addresses will change quite a bit with people, and I guess that's kept up to date via the regional coordinators.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, essentially, the form as it is, has the email address on, because that first part of the garden questionnaire is very much the registration element of garden moth scheme. And so would be no need to update questionnaire just to change an email address. That you should inform your your regional coordinator of that change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way it should work. I mean, clearly the regional coordinator needs to be able to communicate with the recorders, his own recorders, and that's the way that we do it. The regional coordinator would keep an up-to-date record of email addresses, and has to be able to communicate.
Yeah, and ideally, you know, this can be a bit of a challenge, but if we can ensure that we have the up-to-date email addresses also on the master participants list, so should, for instance, Norman lose all of his data, God forbid, you know, then it's retrievable from the master list. So again, that's another function, is this sort of backup system for regional coordinators.
I've just checked the GMS Facebook group, and there is a blank questionnaire in the file section there, so that's available to anyone, any member of the group.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's very good.
Well, won't you need a code relating to your garden questionnaire for a year? Because if you get a change, then obviously you can't use the most up-to-date one. You've got to use the relevant one for whichever data you're analysing per year.
Yeah, we did. If you're going back to my presentation, in the database, the habitats database, there is a year when it's been updated. So when I shown the example of mine in 2015, I had a splurge of wild ivy in my garden, and you know, the researchers can look at that information and identify through that I had wild ivy. I mean, the problem is with something like ivy, it's not really digital. It's not there one year and fully there the next year. But with a pond or a compost heap, then that very much would be the case. You know, you dig your pond in 2015 and it would be there on in your garden, you know, possibly affecting moths available that are around the site at that time. So we've tried to cover that. We are all the while looking at the data and to ensure that we can use it in, or present it and store it in the most appropriate way. And I think the change to the habitats database in the linear form that Mike sorted out for us has been a real move forward.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get an interesting lag. Presumably, you've got a 1 year lag on ponds and a 1 year lag on ivy and so on, because things can't use things straight away. It just
No.
Interesting analysis of problems there.
It is. I think, you know, we have to understand the limitations of the data that we can provide, but it certainly is better information. We're having habitats database to support the moth data as opposed to just moth data on its own.
Yes, there needs to be an analysis of the data, and that analysis has got to recognise that these changes do happen sequentially rather than one at a time. I'm trying to make it plain that there's a gradual increase of ivy, for example. It comes and it goes slowly. The analysis has got to take that into consideration and put some thought behind what the numbers actually say. It isn't as easy as that, never is. I think we're probably going to have to get towards the end of this discussion now, if we may. If there's any more questions, perhaps we can come back to it at the end. But I propose, if that's okay with you, Elaine, that we have a 5-minute break, 5-minute couple of break, Elaine, if that's okay with you. And we'll come to you shortly.
Cool.
5 minutes. Okay, thanks, Elaine. So everybody, if you'd like to take a break now, now's the time to do so, and we'll come back in 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Should be listening to all this.
Hi, the couple who are just about to have a cup of tea, you're live, guys.
Today, so gosh, a lot of work involved.
Yeah, oh yeah. I think we better update ours.
Yeah, I hadn't realised that Roger had done so much. But I mean, I think the main reason for all those blanks, you haven't got the records. Don't you think?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So is Bob Haycock the new Pembrokeshire County record? The new GMS? Well, he and his wife are both Bob and Annie, but Robin Taylor's obviously retired. So that's mine, this is yours. So I just wondered, but could you see who was speaking? That's the Pembrokeshire one was asking you lots of questions.
Yeah, that was Bob Haycock.
Yeah, well, he must be they are very involved. They send endless records to WWB. Now, do you want it zapped?
No, it's pretty hot. Well, I'm glad that's really.
Yeah, it's not it's quite stressful, isn't it? Well, I don't think public speaking was ever your forte. You did fine. I was just a bit disappointed we couldn't. I mean, one of the maps you couldn't see the final column. You know.
Yeah.
Which was a bit of a shame, but anyway, I think they got the gist of it. And inevitably, we didn't get many questions or ideas because people don't care.
No.
It lasted 10 minutes. It lasted 10 minutes. I thought he was going to say more. He gave himself he gave 10 minutes for introduction, but he had you on in 3.
I can see people gradually coming back. We're using a couple of minutes.
People come back.
Some have, some haven't.
Evan, we can hear every word you say.
All right.
To mute then, haven't you?
Thought I did.
Okay, Elaine, do you want to get ready to start?
Yep, I'll have a go sharing my screen.
Okay, let's get going. The next presentation is by Elaine Wright, and she's going to talk about working with local environmental record centres, or the role of LRCs. Elaine is the Senior Recording and Communications Officer at Subrec, which is a local environmental record centre for South East Wales. Over to you, Elaine.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Elaine. I work for Subrec down in South East Wales, and I'm also a participant of Garden Moth Scheme, which is why Norman picked on me to give this talk.
Sorry.
So yeah, I'm just going to talk about the work of LRCs across the UK. It's going to be quite general, but I'm going to make it as mothy as possible with backdrops and stuff on my slides. And apologies if you know everything about LRCs and you're already engaged with your LRC, you can just sort of zone out for 20 minutes. So first things first, what actually is a LRC? So it stands for Local Environmental Record Centres, and we're organisations who facilitate the flow of wildlife data to local decision makers and beyond. There is a network of us across the UK, which is shown here on the left. So the blue and green areas are record centres which are members of ALERC, which is the Alliance of Local Record Centres. And then the grey ones are record centres that do exist, they're just not members of ALERC. As you can see, there's good coverage across most of the UK. Scotland's probably the area with the least active LRCs. And in Wales, we've got complete coverage with 4 record centres. And record centres come in all shapes and sizes, both geographically, obviously, but also in terms of who works there and how many staff there are. So they range from mid-sized independent companies to single staff members that sit within a council. So there's a wide variety of levels of resources and time available depending on the setup of the LRC. So where I work, Subrec is a relatively large LRC with 10 staff, and we run as an independent business. We cover Gwent and Glamorgan, which is shown in the little map in blue down in the right. And so this talk is obviously going to be quite biased towards Subrec because that's where I work and that's what I know. But just to say that not all LRCs will have the same sort of tools and support that I'm talking about. It does depend on how many staff they have. And also there's some quite big differences in Wales compared to the other countries. So some of the tools I mentioned might not be available in your area depending on what country you live in. So we're all different sort of organisations, but the main work of all of us would include these things. So enabling data flow of wildlife records to local decision makers and also international research and other places. Supporting individual recorders that already exist to continue their work, encouraging new recording in different taxon groups or different areas, and also helping people who are new recorders, and celebrating the recording that already goes on in our local areas. So I'm going to talk about these 4 aspects of our work briefly. So first things first, data flow. I didn't want to bombard you with lots of big data flow diagrams like this because I'm honestly not best placed person to talk about it anyway, but I've borrowed this slide from Zoe Randall, who works for Butterfly Conservation, and she created this for a different talk that she gave. So it shows the major points of data flow within the system for, well, moths and butterflies. So Indicia is a system you may have heard of. That is the system that includes iRecord and the various iterations of iRecord apps and so on. Data flow goes into county recorders. The LURCs will take stuff from Indicia and pass it to county recorders, or vice versa. The data goes to the butterfly conservation, various schemes like National Moth Recording Scheme. And all of this then hopefully will also flow to the NBN Atlas. But the big point on this slide is the fact that the garden moth scheme stands alone here. There's no data flow from the garden moth scheme to anywhere else. It's its own data silo. So it's important, if you want the moth records that you collect during GMS to be considered elsewhere, that you take an extra step to get that data onwards to your county recorder or your LURC, or adding into Indicia, so that it gets to the places that it needs to be. Just some examples of incoming data that we deal with at record centres. So as I mentioned, Indicia or iRecord is a major data point for most of us. Not all record centres take data from iRecord, so that is something to bear in mind. They have various apps and stuff as part of iRecord Indicia system. So there's no Moth one, sadly, so I've just highlighted the iRecord Butterflies app. We received data from MapMate. It was interesting to hear it mentioned as the main database for GMS, because we get it for people just sending in their data. Recorder 6, some individual recorders use this. I don't think there are many anymore, but yeah, we do take data from that. Vice county recorders are important incoming data points. So we generally have data exchange agreements with vice county recorders. So they'll give us any data that we don't have, and we give them any data that they don't have. And it just ensures that the database of the both of us match up. We do get paper records from time to time. So if somebody's sitting on lots of notebooks from previous times, then do get in touch with your LURC, because they might be able to help you to digitize that information. And spreadsheets are a major way that we receive data. So we would get those via email from people who have captured their information in spreadsheets. And then the outgoing data. In Wales, we're really lucky we have this website called Aderyn, which has some public-facing tools. So, for example, you can see the species distribution for any species throughout Wales in an output like this map on the left. You can also get a species list for your local area by putting in your postcode, which is really useful. You can see if anybody's been recording moths in your area beforehand. We enable data flow to the NBN Atlas. So you've probably heard of this, but it's kind of the national equivalent to Aderyn. So it's got UK-wide mapping for species distributions. Again, we have data flow out to the vice county recorders. And then some of the major outputs that people probably think of when they think of LURCs is that we feed into the planning systems. So these are just some example outputs for, so a planning authority will get a list every week, with data results for every planning application. And then they can use that data to make decisions about whether to have mitigation or refuse a planning application and so on. We also provide data out to site managers. So this little map on the right is an example of a wildlife trust reserve where we give access to the wildlife trust to all the species data within their reserve, and they can make decisions about site management. And we also give data out to Butterfly Conservation for their various purposes. So another major role that all LURCs undertake is supporting existing recorders, so in their efforts. So an example output is helping with atlases. So this very nice book here on the left was co-written by my colleague Dave Slade. And we would provide like the data to help with the mapping, maybe assist with creating the actual maps for an atlas, and potentially help with publishing costs as well. We also encourage and offer identification assistance. So we've got a webpage on our website dedicated to just linking out to the many, many online resources for species identification. This is just a clip of the moth and butterfly links that we have. I'll put a link to this page in the chat because I think this is sort of nationally useful to everybody. And then on a local level, we've got a Facebook group where people can post pictures and ask for help with ID and share their findings and so on. So this is just for South East Wales, but I think a lot of record centres have an equivalent group that you can find. Another major role we do with supporting is tech help. So an example of this is at the moment we're at Subrec, we're helping to get the Garden Moth Scheme website back online. So we're hosting it, and then my colleague Dave is going to sort of be the webmaster, just updating the links and so on. I think he's finished building it. It's just we're waiting for somebody to flip a switch somewhere to turn it on. So I'm hoping it will be online next week or in the next couple of weeks for people to start using again. So another major thing that we do is to encourage people to start recording or record new things or record in new places. So one of the ways we do this is through equipment and book lending scheme. We've got lots of moth traps available through this scheme in Subrec, and they're always the most popular items. So we have sort of lent out traps for a couple of months, and that has then developed people's interest enough that they have gone on to become Garden Moth Scheme recorders. So that's always nice to see. And we've also got a grant application. So on the right is a pie chart of all the different types of grants that we've given out recently. And as you can see, moth traps again is the most popular item that people ask for. Another thing we do is encourage people to upskill themselves, so via training. So for example, during lockdown, we ran a series of online moth courses. They're still on YouTube if anybody's interested in checking those out. And then also we do in-person courses, quite often of more difficult groups. So we did a moth dissection course just over a year ago. To try and increase the number of people that are, doing the aggregate species and so on. And we also organise events, so people get access to sites they might not be able to visit or be able to do group activities. So this particular picture is from a BioBlitz we had at Flatholm Island off the coast of South East Wales. And we had people staying overnight, so obviously we had plenty of moth trap activity going on during that event, and we do try and run a moth trap at events whenever we can. And the other thing we like to do is to celebrate the work that is being done by the recorders in our area. So a few examples of how we do that. We have a record of the week where we do a sort of shout out on our social media for like a record that's come in during the week. And these are quite often moth records. I'm a little bit biased because I pick the record of the week. Also quite often we would point out records that are new to Wales or new to the area. And we did have a really good year in Wales last year where I think 5 new species or more were added to the Welsh fauna of moths. So we had quite a mothy year last year. We run an annual conference. Unfortunately, I didn't have a moth picture, so I've picked the natural enemy of the moth and included a bat picture. But this is an opportunity for people to talk about what work they're doing and network with other people in the recording community. We also have a biannual newsletter where people can discuss their findings or ask questions of other recorders. And as a record centre, we in Wales, we write a biannual update for Nature Cymru, which is a Welsh journal, quite often sort of going through the new additions to the Welsh fauna in the recent past. And occasionally we do have recorder awards as well. So this year is actually the 20th anniversary of Subrek. So we did do some recorder awards in our most recent forum. So how do you get involved with your LURC? So the most important first step, obviously, is working out which record centre you fall in. So there is a tool to do this on the Alert website. I put the link there, but I'll put it into the chat as well. You just put in your postcode and it'll tell you where you fall. Then I would check looking at their website or perhaps getting in contact with them about their preferred method of data submission, because it may be that they don't take data from Indicia, or they might have an arrangement with their vice county recorder to get the data that way. And then convert your GMS data into a suitable record format for them. I think there's going to be a tool on the website to be able to sort of run a macro and get the data into a proper format from this year onwards. And then once you've got your GMS data in the correct form, and obviously any other data that you have, send that in. So I always take the intruders in my moth trap. So I have lots of crane flies and ladybirds and stuff, data like that as well, that I would send in. And then I would encourage you to sort of engage with your LURC, so sign up for their social media or their emails, get in contact with them, and just start a beautiful friendship with your LURC, and hopefully it can be a nice relationship in the future. So that's it from me. I'm not sure how I did for time, but yeah, has anybody got any questions? I'm happy to take them.
Thanks, Elaine, that was brilliant. Questions?
Just a comment, as a director of a local record centre over here, I do really think it's important that we get our records into local record centres. That's where they're going to really be useful, you know, locally anyway.
Yes, absolutely. And we do enable stuff to go onto the NBN Atlas as well. So I think it can be nationally important as well, because like students and researchers sort of take data from that source.
I mean, as a matter of sending our records to our county recorder, I have a column in the comments, basically it says that they're GMS records. This goes with the Excel spreadsheet. So when they go into our local record centre, it's pretty obvious that these are from that particular scheme, and therefore they can be filtered out, you know, if necessary. But yeah, it'd be great if we had a standardised approach to that, I think.
Yeah, I think that I've heard that there is like a converter that you can use to put the data into the right format, but I haven't used it myself.
There is, and it works very well.
Okay, cool. That saves everybody retyping everything.
Yes, just so you know, I'm the chairman of our local record centre as well. So there's a certain amount of Welsh content here somehow. Any more questions?
Can I just say, in the northeast, I think there's been a bit of a reluctance to send moth data to, we always call it Eric up here, which seems much more friendly than LURC somehow. I don't know, is there a general reluctance elsewhere for moth data? I think because of the difficulty in identification for a number of species, to send them to Eric.
So is there reluctance from the record centre to receive the data, do you mean?
No, I don't think from the record centre to receive it, but from the county recorders to send it.
Okay, yeah. The relationship between the local record centre and the vice county recorder will vary depending on where you are. But I know that, you know, most LURCs would work hard to try and have a good relationship with their vice county recorders. But I don't know much about Eric. I had a couple of colleagues who've worked there in the past, but I'm not sure about the situation up there really. But I would perhaps get in touch with Eric and see what their feelings are.
Well,
And
in fact, we've got a conference with Eric next Saturday, so I'll ask him then what his relationship is with Moth recorders.
I mean, at Subrec, we're really lucky because my colleague Dave is the Vice County Moth recorder for Glamorgan, so we have a great relationship with ours, but I know it does vary from lurk to lurk.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that that's one of the important factors about lurks, is that they are dependent on recorders, county recorders, for providing their records, and they should try to make the relationship as smooth as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, we work really hard to, you know, make things easy on both sides and, you know, offer any support we can, because the record centre isn't anything unless we have the volunteer recorders and the vice county recorders doing the work. So we very much want to feed back into the community as much as we can.
I can say that last week I sent my county records for 2023 to the local record centre in all sorts of horrible formats, all in Excel in one way or another, but in a range of different formats. And they were brilliant, and they reformatted them all into one format so that I can now go through them and verify them. So you can make use of your lurk if you can get them to do things like that.
Yeah. And as I say, you know, it does depend on how much staff time they have, but they'll be as helpful as they can be. Sometimes it's and sometimes it's somebody who's doing it half time in a council, and it is difficult, but we're all doing our best. I hope.
Norman, I'm just thinking, as you as a county recorder and also as with your lurk hat on as well, I do wonder, you know, our county, because of the various systems people can record things now, particularly through iRecord and whatever, there may be stuff coming in from all different directions to county recorders, making it difficult to verify certain records. And therefore, if GMS got caught up in that as well, it would be a problem for county recorders to feel they've got sufficient time to deal with those things. And maybe that's part of the problem for things not going to the lurks or the Erics of this world, if there's some feeling we can't cope with the verification that's required. Is that an issue?
Exactly, Bob. That's exactly what I've asked my lurk to do, is to take all of these records, including iRecord records, and sort them into one format. Because you're right, more and more different kinds of records are coming in from all directions to a county recorder, making life harder. And it's up to the lurk, if possible, to make the county recorder's life easier. And then you've got one data set in one Excel spreadsheet to go through and verify. Other county recorders, what experience do they have with their lurks? Silence.
Can I ask a question, please?
Of course.
I came across OBS Identify last year, and they claim that they're the largest nature database. How do they fit into this picture?
So OBS Identify is a Dutch system. So they're based on the continent. They do have, so I use OBS Identify for the identification tool, which I find really useful. And I think there is an option on there to submit the data via that route, but that wouldn't go to anywhere in the UK. I think it goes into a European database. It kind of skips various levels. So with OBS ID, I use it for identification purposes, but then I wouldn't submit the data there. I'd take the data and put it into Indicia because I know it's going to the right places. I know that the iRecord team are working with OBS ID so they've actually borrowed the AI system from OBS ID, and it's now implemented on the iRecord app as well. So I know they're working together, but I don't think the data flow is there yet. So I wouldn't add data there yet. It may be in the future that you can. And there's also
Elaine. I'll do the same as you then and just use it to identify.
It's brilliant for identification. But yeah, I'm not quite sure where the data ends up yet.
Okay, thanks.
Right, thank you everybody for that. I think it's now time to move on. So thanks very much, Elaine. That was very enlightening. And if we can move on now to Mike. Where are you, Mike? There you are. Mike is going to tell us about a regional view of Garden Moth scheme. Mike doubles as area coordinator or regional coordinator for North East England and is our IT wizard. You produce the recording forms every year. Another non-trivial task. Over to you, Mike.
I'm just trying to find share screen.
Yes, I was wondering how it works as well, so I'll probably be, oh, well done.
Come on. Slideshow from the beginning.
Thanks, Elaine. Well done. You're there.
Right. I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator for the Garden Moth Scheme. And when I took over the job in 2013, the Northeast wasn't particularly well represented. Dave Grundy started the GMS in the West Midlands, and I think we had about sort of 12 or 13 recorders, and that's vastly fewer than there were in the sort of, towards the English Midlands. In 2013, GMS was given 5 traps by Anglian Lepidopterous Supplies, who sponsored us, to give to people who wanted to try moth recording. We managed to get 2 of those traps to the Northeast because we were underrepresented. Now, I couldn't help thinking that it would be far better if we could lend these traps out. If you lend a trap out, then you can lend it to someone else next year and someone else the next year after. So even if no one buys their own trap, you're getting fresh data from different areas. But in actual fact, some of the people would buy their own trap, and therefore you'd sort of build up more recorders. Now, what happened is that my county recorder criticised the fact that we used to put our moths through the washing machine. We had a lot of moths with a lot of scales missing, and he wondered if that was because we had quite a small moth trap. It was a Skinner trap. It was based around a plastic box we got from B&Q. So in 2012, I built a new, larger moth trap, which is a wooden Skinner, and used the original electric set. And 2013, we lent our trap to friends. If these friends knew nothing about mothing, but they were willing to try it, and they did submit a valid data set. So apart from anything else, it is possible to get 2 valid data sets in the same year from one moth trap if you share it and use a different night. Now, I know it says in the instructions that you should trap on a Friday night, but that's just to stop the bias you'd get if experienced mothers adjusted their night to trap up when they have the best conditions. So we say trap on Friday night, but if you want to lend it out, they could trap on Saturday night or Thursday night or any other night. So you can get extra data from your moth trap if you lend it to someone. So Joe and Linda actually bought their own, they may be here for all I know today at this conference. Joe and Linda bought their own trap, and that was a success. Next year, I lent a trap to another friend, and that wasn't, no, that's sorry, that I then bought a new electric set to make this old trap, plastic box trap, usable, and lent it to another friend, and that wasn't so good. He was a mathematician, and he was trying to train Google Images to recognize moths, and it's not that easy. You need I suspect, a big data set. So he lost interest and didn't end up submitting a valid data set. But that's normal. I've been lending moth traps for quite a few years now, and what I find is that if I lend out 5 traps, if 2 people buy their own moth traps, that's great. If 3 buy their own moth traps, I'm over the moon. So as far as I was concerned, 1 out of 2 was successful. So I then applied to Eric Northeast, which is the local environmental record centre that was already been mentioned, and they give small grants, and I applied to buy a second loan trap, which I called Eric 1. That worked well. And then Kath, who was given one of the ALS traps back in 2013, decided she'd had enough. I don't think she could cope with the number of moths that she was catching. She was an ex-market gardener. She had a fantastic garden full of flowers. And I think because she had so many flowers, she attracted so many moths that she couldn't cope. So she kindly donated the trap to me. So that was trap KB1. I kept advertising these 2 traps, 3 traps now, and people contact you because your advertisements puts the GMS out there. People are aware of it, and there is the good thing is that people contact you who have their own moth trap. They've never used it very much, but because the name GMS is out there, they contact you and ask if you can, if they can join the GMS, and ask to find out about it. But this lady Sue, who was a widow living in Northumberland, her husband had trapped moths, and she had 2 moth traps which she donated. So that's GS1 and GS2. So I've now got 5 moth traps I lend out. In 2021, Anne, who had been participating in the GMS since 2016, and who I think is probably at this meeting today, said she wanted to devote more time to nutmegging. Now, I don't know if I have to kill you if I told you what nutmegging is, but if you want to know, I'll tell you in the questions. You probably already know. Anyway, she lent me per trap. So that's 6 lone traps. What effect has that had? Oh, sorry. How do I find my customers? I advertise through the Natural History Society of Northumbria, which is based at the Great North Museum, Hancock. In the very same building, you have Eric Northeast, Northumberland and Tyneside Bird Club. Mothing dovetails very well with birding. If you in July, late July, early August, all the birds are fledged. Most of them are no longer breeding unless they're doing second or third broods. So they're not holding territories, they're not singing. But the trees are still full of flipping leaves, so you can't see them. And they're not making much noise, so it's quiet moth. Whereas at the end of July and the beginning of August is the peak time for moths, so they fit very well together. So I advertise moth traps to lend through the bird club and butterfly conservation. In spite of their names, some members are interested in moths as well as butterflies. So they advertise moth traps to lend in their regular magazine that they put out. So what's the effect of this? This is a number of participants in the Northeast who are relatively unconnected with the loan scheme. I say relatively unconnected because, as I said before, the loan scheme, when I advertise the loan scheme, it also advertises the GMS. So there's a sort of byproduct of the loan scheme in that people contact me and say, I don't want to borrow a moth trap, but tell me about the GMS because I have a moth trap. If I then add on the people who borrow a moth trap once, submit data, but aren't interested enough to carry on, that's the extra participants that I have from people who just trap the 1 year. But the real gain is people who then buy their own moth trap. So due to them, due to the moth trap loan scheme, I've virtually doubled the amount of participants in the Northeast. Now, I thought I could show you here how numbers have risen in comparison with everyone else, but all these lines are all over the shop. Now, I'm a great fan of Chris Packham and his pie charts and all his other charts. A picture paints 1,000 words. You can be presented with columns of figures and you can't see it, you can't see the trend. You need a picture to see what's happening. But here there are so many lines from all the different regions that you can't see where it's going. So then I thought, right, I'll average the number of participants for all regions and compare the Northeast region with that. When I say all regions, the average includes the figures from Northeast. So if I carry on there, you can see that the loan scheme definitely makes a difference. So as far as I'm concerned, lending traps works. In 2012, the number of Northeast participants was slightly more than a quarter of the average number across all regions. And now we're have more than the average number across all regions. So we've caught up. Now, I'm a regional coordinator, but I don't think that's a prerequisite for running a loan scheme. I'm sure any of the GMS coordinators would be delighted if someone in their region offered to run a loan scheme. When I lend a trap, it comes with a few pots, most of which I get back again, but sometimes there's a few tops missing. And that's probably enough for the person borrowing the trap to cope until end of May, beginning of June, when numbers tend to go through the roof. Then they'd have to buy their own trap, own pots. I'm pleased to say the borrowers do their very best to look after the trap they borrowed. And I also lend out some spare copies of field guides and concise guides, at least until I run out. So that's my loan scheme. Are there any questions?
Yes, Mike, that was very interesting. What type of trap are you loaning out?
I've got 4 Skinner traps. It's a 15-watt tube. A pair of 30-watt tubes and a couple of 40-watt U tubes. And I've also got 2 Heath traps with 40-watt U tubes.
Thanks.
I mean, the big bugbear with the Heath traps is trying to stop the water getting in, basically. I mean, you can easily put a roof on a Skinner trap, just need 4 threaded steel rods and plastic sheeting over the top. But it's far more difficult to try to put a roof on a Heath trap. But at one time, if you wanted to build a Skinner trap, there was a design on the ALS website that they used to use for their wooden traps they used to make. But I'm not sure if that's still there or not. But if it's not, I've got that design somewhere.
We'll put on our website.
Sorry?
It's perhaps something we could put on our garden mosquing website.
I probably could, yeah.
Something to think about anyway. Any more questions? Okay, in that case, thank you, Mike. We'll move on to.
How are we for time? Am I did I stop short, or are we okay?
No, we're fine. We're fine.
Because I've done another short presentation on how I analyze the data, but if I'm out of time, I just stop now.
Could you keep it to 10 minutes?
Yep. Right. I just got to find the other presentation.
That's fine. Yes, I deliberately built in a bit of extra time on the conference, but I thought you need a bit of flexibility. So I'd like to start, if I can, at about 12 for a final discussion.
All right, let's see, we can start this off.
Are you winning?
Screen.
Thanks, Andrew.
I'll show from beginning. Come on. I hate IT. I really do.
You're our IT expert, Mike.
Right, can you see that?
Yes. Fine.
Okay. So when I analyze data, to start with, I thought, what kind of year are we having? So I decided to plot the number of records against the year. So we're having an excellent time. We're going up. But then again, as I said in my talk just now, I've increased the number of participants. So what I really need to do is to plot the number of records divided by the number of participants. So here I've got the number of participants, number of records, and I divide by the number of participants. And what I get is that. But the great thing about the garden moth scheme is that it not only records what people catch, it records when they don't trap. And did not trap is something else we can allow for in the analysis. So we know that in Q4 you have 9 weeks, and therefore the maximum number of trap nights is 9 times the number of participants. But we also know that in 2012 there were 3 did not traps, and therefore you can take away the 3 from the 36 max trap nights, and you end up with 63 max trap nights. So you end up with 60 nights where you did trap. So that's what I do regularly. And that's the big advantage of the garden moth scheme, is that we record when we don't trap. We also record when we trap but catch nothing. And that is not something you would ever get from National Moth Recording Scheme data. And this is why our data is so valuable for statisticians trying to look for trends, because they can allow for the fact that people haven't trapped. The GMS is a system where, as far as possible, we standardize our trapping regime. We all trap weekly between March and October. We all trap once a week, preferably on a Friday. We don't trap 3 or 4 times because the weather's warm and muggy and we've got lots of lovely micros. And we all trap between dawn and dusk. We don't pack in at 10 o'clock. So as far as possible, we standardize everything. And we only we only record the commoner moths. This means that if someone analyze our data at the species level, and I don't know if anyone has ever done that, whether any of these researchers have analyzed specific species, but the fact that we record the common moths means there'll probably be enough records for them to be useful statistically. And that's it. I just wanted to point out, the value of the garden moth scheme in the fact that it's a standardized trapping regime. It's the equivalent to a sort of a constant effort bird ringing scheme. Any
That's
questions on that?
Mike, you're right. Dave Grundy, I know, put a lot of effort in to designing the scheme before he started in 2003, and he had a lot of good advice to try to ensure that the records were as useful as they could be for statisticians and for analysis. And I think he did a great job.
That's obvious from the screen, from the scheme, you know, the instructions that he had very good advice.
Yeah. Okay, any further questions for Mike? In which case we'll move on to me. I'll have a little bit of discussion if we can. If I can get share screen to work. So I've got to try and do it now. And I've not done this before, so we'll see what happens. Is that working?
Yes.
Gosh. Right, let's go on then. So I'm going to try and think about where we go in the future, and I'd like some comments as we develop it. So I know this has been covered already, but that's what happens when you're the last presenter in a conference. A lot of what you're going to say has already been said in a different format, but never mind. Just to look back, 2003, we started, just the West Midlands. 2005, Dave recruited me to make a slight expansion beyond the West Midlands, and I started in 2005. By 2007, we were a national scheme. Up to 2014, Dave Grundy acted as scheme coordinator and had an awful lot to do. Passed it on to Heather Young and then Stephen Passy. But the fact is that a scheme coordinator in an organisation like this has a hell of a job, because things have changed. We now have a huge database. We've heard from a number of people, including Roger, the increased importance of personal data protection and GDPR. That's not something that really we thought about a lot at the beginning, and it's increased the workload enormously. Then there's things like social media expansion in a way that's contributing a lot, but also requires a lot of management. So I think now that GMS is too much for one person who acts as a scheme coordinator, and I think we've found that it's just been too much. So that's why I think we're suggesting a little steering group to take on the role. And the suggestion is that we have a steering group, and we have discussions by email with occasional online meetings. So most of it's going to be done online, well, almost all it's going to be online, either by email or the occasional meeting. And to try to allocate resources, we think a group chair, a treasurer, data coordinator, questionnaire recorder list coordinator, recording form producer, newsletter editor, web administrator, and GMS report writer. These are things that the area coordinators. These are things that we're doing already, but we just want to try to make sure there's a little bit more formal in terms of who's doing what. I worry slightly about area coordinators wanting to be involved. Some I think will, but some perhaps won't. But I think that's going to be down to them to decide. So that's what we thought, and in a sense, we're already making that happen, because to an extent that there are people allocated to most of those tasks, and that's where we are now. So Audrey's become treasurer. There's something we haven't really done much of in the last few years is managing a bank account, but we now have a treasurer and moving towards a bank account. Data coordinator, Audrey's been doing that already. Questionnaire and recorder list. Roger, well, we've heard all about that, and he's doing a grand job there. Mike's producing the recording forms. I do the newsletters. I have them for many years. And in the web, we've got Elaine and Dave, and Ellen doing the GMS reports, the quarterly reports. But in terms of the group chair, does anybody fancy taking that on? It's gone deathly quiet. In which case, I don't mind doing that if people are happy with that. I'll take on the role of group chair, which is not the same as scheme coordinator, because it's just too much for one person to do. But just trying to keep the thing together slightly, I don't mind doing that. So if everybody's happy with that.
Very much so.
Right, fair enough, then I'll take that on. But again, the area coordinators, we would keep in touch with them by email, make sure they know what's going on, but they don't have to contribute if they think it'd be too much. That's really about it. Remember, we talked about policies, personal data security, GMS data transfer. Oh yeah, we haven't really talked much about that. GMS data transfer agreements, where we send out, where we allow the wide world out there to make use of our data. We have an agreement with them that specifies how they can use it, and that's something that we've developed over fairly recently. Bank account management is taken on by Audrey, but we do need to keep things as simple as we can. I worry an awful lot that we get too involved in bureaucracy. We've been very careful as a garden moth scheme to not have bureaucracy, to be as loose as possible. But now I think the time has come to introduce a bit of control. And we need to plan for the future, including succession planning, because some of us are not quite as young as they used to be. In fact, everybody's not quite as young as they used to be, but some it's getting a bit more so than others. And we need to recognize that people will want to give up their roles at some stage. And we need to think about how we deal with that and how we have a plan for succession. So those are the things we need to do. And then there's the 2025 conference. I guess I'm very encouraged by the number of people who come to this online conference. To what extent we want to do that the same next year, I don't know. To what extent we might want to have an in-person conference, perhaps. If people think that they would like to have an in-person conference, then let us know early on, because they take an awful lot of planning. And equally, if somebody wants to take on the role of planning a 2025 conference, that would be absolutely brilliant. Just something perhaps for people to think about. So that's really just an introduction to the discussion. I'd like to hear what people think about where we are now, the way that I propose we go, and how we tackle some of the issues that are clearly going to be developing over the years. So that's the end of me. If I can get out of this. There we are. Okay, what do people think? Open forum.
Could I kick off just with a sort of well, discussion about social media? Actually, you just briefly mentioned it there. So I run the Derbyshire Moths Facebook group, which has grown exponentially since COVID, as you can imagine, and somebody's already mentioned it in the talk that during the COVID period we had many more mothers, coming online, if you like. So we've seen the growth in the Derbyshire Moths Facebook group rise to quite a considerable level. Some people are just interested in what we're catching. Some people are actually active and moth trapping in their gardens and stuff. And that's led the Facebook group to kind of feed into the county recorder position. So in Derbyshire, we sadly lost our county recorder in 2022, and Butterfly Conservation were unable to sort of replace him. So we had a year or so without any county recorder, which was a bit of a disastrous effect. Yeah. So the Derbyshire Moths group have kind of gone in conjunction with the Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire Entomological Society, and we're now part of a county recorder team, if you like. So there's about 9 of us that are taking on the role of iRecord verification and being a point of contact for Derbyshire moth records. And that's basically driven through the kind of social media, the Facebook group. So I just wondered if anybody else has got experience. It's not really been mentioned here, but I wonder if that's evident in other counties.
I think we could probably do with more help in terms of developing social media, and again looking for volunteers to get together with other people, like-minded people, and try and develop our social media content.
I mean, in Northumberland, we're in a very similar situation because we no longer have a county moth recorder. So 3 of us are iRecord verifiers, and the approved route by Butterfly Conservation for Northumberland records now is through iRecord.
Yeah, we had conversations with Zoe at Woodfire Conservation, who used you as an example, in fact.
I mean, I don't know if it's be of use to you, but I've developed some instructions for importing records to iRecord for people who already have their own spreadsheets or who use MapMate. So I'm quite willing to share that with you if you haven't got anything similar.
That would have been really useful about 2 months ago. So we have developed some instructions ourselves, and we're encouraging people to use iRecord as a kind of central storage system, because from what I can understand, iRecord firstly is open to the public, so anybody can get access to the records, which I personally think is a good way of sharing moth records, or well, nature records in general. But then iRecord, it seems to be very simple to use as well, so you can import spreadsheets, which I think is incredibly useful. But then we've also got to obviously cater for those people that have their own spreadsheets or still prefer to kind of send emails and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's quite a complex kind of area, but hopefully we'll see when this will be our first season of moth recording and getting records into the system, if you like. So there will be bugbears, I'm sure, but we'll see how we go.
Best of luck on that.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any?
That's just a comment on, I think what's been shown is there seems to have been, obviously we saw the peak of recorders in post around COVID, but there just seemed to be a general drop off. And I've certainly noticed that in the East Midlands, that, I'm not able to recruit to counteract those who have decided not to continue. And I just wondered whether or not there's something we could probably do better, I know, to encourage more recorders, and possibly for people to be aware of the benefits of the scheme. Obviously, a lot of the people on today are already familiar with the scheme. I have advertised through Steve's Derbyshire group and Nottinghamshire as well, and the Leicestershire. And there seems to be a limited take-up of people, even though I think we're seeing a general increase in the number of people moth recording, but they're not quite tuned into GMS. And I just wondered if there's something more we could do on that. I know Mike was talking about lending traps. That's obviously one scheme, but I just wondered if others have got any other thoughts on this.
I mean, one thing I found about lending traps is that since I started, I've never had a problem finding people to lend them to until this year. And this year I got one trap and I haven't managed to find the sixth person to lend it to. Quite a few people have applied, but when I sent them the questionnaire and asked them to fill in the questionnaire, they went silent. I think what it is that a lot of people have spent a lot of time at home during the lockdown, and now everyone's going mad with long holidays and holidays down the other side of the world, and they can't put the resources into participating in the GMS because they're away too much.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. One of the things I say to any new recorders who have concerns over whether they can give the amount of time, start it and see how you get on. There's no commitment to continue it. If it doesn't work for you, then feel free to bow out. But I think the 36 weeks, although we're only looking for 27 and no more than 3 weeks gap, probably on the surface looks a bit daunting to people on a commitment point of view. But I think the reality of it is it's not that daunting in reality. And for people to give it a try, start to get feedback on what the GMS is all about via the quarterly newsletters, then hopefully then we can get people more engaged to continue. But I'm certainly struggling to get people to join.
This sounds like
Mike,
a common problem. It sounds as though several people are finding that the numbers of recorders is going down. So maybe we need some way of getting ourselves out into the public consciousness. And I can't help thinking that social media must have a part to play. I'm looking to see how we can develop our social media output. And frankly, I'm looking for volunteers.
Mike, as far as the Northeast is concerned, you mentioned Northumberland Bird Club. I could always try Durham Bird Club.
That's true, yeah. And I haven't got any contacts there. Oh,
Well, you have.
Oh, right.
You got
yes.
me.
Good thinking. Thank you.
That sounds like an offer.
Could you put the word out, please? Because as I said, I still have one trap which is sitting in the front room.
I'll put something on the WhatsApp group and see if anybody's interested.
Yeah, great.
Norman, I think you're absolutely right in terms of social media being a kind of approach to people. We're very fortunate in Derbyshire to have Roger on the group, and as Roger just mentioned, he posts about GMS quite a lot. I'm also the secretary for the Derbyshire Ornithological Society, and we've got a similar kind of engagement problem in terms of getting people to actually do stuff is really difficult. And what we've found is that a direct approach, a private direct approach, either via email or telephone call or just meeting people in the field, is a much better way to get people involved, because they can very easily ignore group send emails and all that kind of stuff, email shots or whatever. So I think a more personal approach and plenty of communication and education is the way forward.
But you need the person to make that personal approach.
That's very true. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I have to say that in my little county of Breconshire, I've got a very, very good and strong following for Garden Moth scheme.
Excellent.
Because I'm able to have that personal approach. You can do that, but it's much more difficult to do a personal approach to someone far away that you can't get to meet.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Socially, for example.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, but I think it does need to be driven by somebody like yourself, like the county recorder, or somebody in a position of authority. But I totally agree. It depends on time and commitments, and we're all busy people, and it's difficult.
Yeah. Can I just say we've got over 3,000 members on the Garden Moth Facebook page. I'm signing one a day virtually, so perhaps we should be inviting more of our followers to actually get on board.
Well, I think there's two things. You're right. I think the way to do that, I guess, is to get people to say that directly on the various Facebook pages that we have. Come on, lads, lads and lasses, come on and join the Garden Moth scheme.
They must have an interest, mustn't they?
But I think
the
Garden sorry, carry on, Steve.
You, Tony.
I was just going to say that I trawl through Facebook groups quite a lot, looking at moths, and the Garden Moth Scheme Facebook group is not as busy as it used to be. There's a few posts, but I don't think many of those thousands of members are probably looking at it regularly. But the county Facebook groups, we've got a very good one in Gloucestershire run by Steve French, and that's quite busy. And it might be worth a post on that. Just inviting people to think about joining GMS, which I could do.
Yeah, please do.
I think that there's a really good moth community on Twitter nowadays, and I don't feel like GMS does anything over there, or X as it's called nowadays. It could be worth setting up an account on there.
What I don't know is who would do that.
I'm frightened to put my hand up because I'm already running about social media accounts. But I might be persuaded to do a Twitter account.
That would be really helpful if you could, Elaine. And what I recognise is I don't want you to suck you into huge amounts of extra work. But if you can at least put a little bit of initial time to set something up.
Yeah, I think like a weekly post is really useful, and because it's a weekly scheme, it should be quite easy to just be like, it's Friday, put your traps out sort of post. That would be fine.
That's absolutely fantastic. Yes, please. Thank you. Anybody else? Martin? So you're
Can I? Oh, sorry, I've not seen
Hillary.
you. Can I say that I'm very new, so I've only done this for 2 years, and I found out about it through Elaine, I think, through the Subrec group, and it's been amazing because I knew nothing about moths. But I think the thing, I was just lucky because Elaine, I happened to put the trap out in like February time, and then Elaine pointed me in the direction of this scheme, and it was just starting for the year. And my impression is that if I'd have been pointed in the middle of the year when there's bumper moths, I would have read the information and gone, oh, well, I can't do it this year. And then by the time it rolls around again. So I do I've done the garden bird watch for years, and that very much says you can start and stop at any time, which is obviously much easier. So it's just something around that, or just to get people going, the strictness of the recording. Even if you don't actually use their data, maybe they don't need to know that initially to get them hooked.
That's interesting, Hillary. I mean, as you know, I'm your aerial Wales coordinator, and I've not thought about doing that, but it's something I might try.
Yeah, it's just to get you in, because I think a lot of people, once you're in, you get hooked. But it's that feeling, if like, and as you say with long holidays, if you book a holiday for 4 weeks and then it's like, oh, well, I might as well not bother this year, and easy to drop out, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I did wonder about the timing as well. I'm a regional coordinator in Warwickshire and Worcestershire, but now live in Lincolnshire. So on behalf of Roger, I kind of advertised through the Lincolnshire Facebook group this year, and I got a number of kind of likes and things like that within it, but nobody actually kind of followed up with me, and I don't know whether anybody followed up with Roger.
No, they haven't. No.
But that group it's fairly active during the middle of the mothing season, but actually there's probably 1 or 2 posts a week at this time of year. In sort of February, it's probably just starting to get going a bit more now. But in February, when you need to be advertising it for the start of the GMS year, I suspect a lot of people who would be on there fairly regularly in the summer aren't actually looking at it at that time of year. And that might be one of the reasons why it's kind of difficult to get uptake through those groups. And we might need to think about, actually, let's advertise it during the middle of the year, give people sort of taster sessions somehow. Given that Evan's doing an analysis for the newsletter once a quarter, actually, if someone joins halfway through the year, their records can still go into that analysis for the newsletter, even if they're not ending up on the national database in the end of at the end of that year. So it's the records are not kind of completely unused. So maybe that's something to think about.
I think, Stephen, we do that in Wales already, because Evan, I think, does do. Where are you, Evan? I think you do use people's records, even if it's only just one of the quarters, don't you?
Yeah, anyone who sends in the records goes into those quarters. Whether they're going to the general scheme in the end, I don't know. That's not up to me.
Yeah.
But I think there is a general view. If someone comes along, as Steve was saying, in May, that you tend to indicate to them that the scheme has already started. Can you come back next year? I'll keep your email on file and I'll contact you. But as was said, the fact Evan does his quarterlies anyway, still would indicate to the potential recorders that their data is being looked at and will be analysed. So I think that's a good idea that Stephen was saying, that we shouldn't discourage people if they start halfway through, but maybe we need to indicate to them that the data will be used in the current assessments, but it's not suitable for the database at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think I will start doing that, certainly.
Yeah, I think I will as well. Yeah.
That's what I do with my recorders. If they missed a block of weeks, I'll say, well, we can still use your data for the newsletters.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. That's a very good point.
Well, that gives us the opportunity then to advertise through the Facebook groups in, I don't know, May or June, when a lot more people are looking at them and they're a lot more active, because people are catching more moths and wanting more moths identified. And we may have a better chance of attracting people at that time of year than we have in February.
Right. Any other thoughts, questions, issues?
There was a question in the chat early on, Norman, about the garden questionnaire.
Right.
About what size of wood constitutes actually being a wood.
I have no idea. Roger, have you any thoughts about that one?
I did have a quick look on Google to see what it said, but it wasn't particularly useful, really. It's sort of saying it's smaller than a forest and bigger than a copse. But I'm not quite sure how we can define that. I think we'd probably look at it as a standing of a reasonable number of trees, but I don't know how we define that. I can look into that in a bit more detail, but again, we've got however many records already where people have interpreted their own way. And again, this consistency comes into it, and just ensuring what we mean.
I suppose in reality, we're asking whether you have a group of trees that is likely to provide a population that's likely to influence the population of moths.
Yeah, and I think you're right.
I can't help thinking that group of trees could be quite small.
Maybe you should name trees.
You don't need many oak trees around your house, your garden, to constitute a source of feeding moths.
Yeah, I mean, in my garden, I've got beech and not sycamore. I keep on thinking about Sycamore Gap, beech and birch and cherries, and wouldn't exactly call it a wood as such, but certainly quite a few trees that could influence moths coming in.
So what did you say in your questionnaire?
I don't know. I can't remember now. It's that long since I filled it in. If I was asked, do I have any big trees? I'd say yes. If I was asked, do I have a wood? I'd probably say no.
I think it asks about oak trees specifically and big trees.
It does, yeah.
I suspect we're not going to have a definitive answer to that question, but best endeavours.
Yeah, I think another definition I found is a dense growth of trees, usually greater in extent than a grove and smaller than a forest. So I think it is the dense growth of trees probably is a pointer, but again, how you would quantify that in reality, I think we're going to have to use a bit of general common sense on that.
Bit of judgment.
A judgment, that's the word.
With respect to
the 3 weeks, missing on the 3 weeks and the records not being acceptable, is it not possible to find out where other people are in the area? Because people come and do a week's, even 1 week record in those 3 weeks would make the records for the rest of the year acceptable, and get volunteers to come in and continue. I've done that in the past in Shropshire.
I think that's something that we have in the past recommended people do. I don't know whether it's still in the instructions, but it certainly used to be in the early days that Dave would say, if you've got friends nearby, get them to put out your moth trap. I've done it for friends myself in the past.
Yeah, well, I've done that, and that helps with keeping the records. And rather than negate records, you can continue to include records.
Yes, exactly. Ken, I think you were one who said something, were you?
I was trying to say, maybe name individual trees within, say, 100 yards of your trap. You know, it could be in a neighbour's garden, not yours.
Yeah.
You know, trees and shrubs. I've got a hawthorn hedge behind me. The neighbour behind me's got a beech tree. There's some aspens just down the road, and there used to be a poplar tree until they cut it down the road the other way. There's also hornbeam trees behind me.
It's judgment again, isn't it? I think it's all you can do.
Yeah. But if on the form we named trees, trees or hedgerow species that are within 100 yards of your trap, that might help.
We'll think about it, I think. Or we say. We're getting near the end of our time, I think. I think we did agree to finish at 12:30. We're nearly there, but are there any more questions? Are you sure? In which case, at 12:27, 3 minutes to go, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming and taking part, everybody for showing interest, everybody for doing records, but especially our presenters who've done a fantastic job and made an enormous contribution, a varied contribution. And thank you very much to all of you. And thank you, and have a good day, and keep mothing, keep on mothing.